And can you just confirm you can see that okay?
I can confirm that.
Marvellous. So hi everyone, I'm Nicky Perry. I'm also the director of a clinical trials unit. And I'd like to start off by saying, and now for something completely different and I think that's why these seminars work really well, because you get to see how we all ended up where we are today. So I'm going to start with, this is where it all started for me as a nurse back in 1981. I've put in brackets, I know you're all on mute, but I've put in brackets that it is okay to have a giggle at me looking like something out of Call the Midwife. So this was my nurse training in May 1981 at the Westminster Hospital. So I thought, nice icebreaker. There I am with my mother's lovely brown carpet and curtains. But my nursing career started in when I qualified as an enrolled nurse. So we did 2 years training. Enrolled nurse training was a bit like a healthcare assistant might be today. It was very practical, very hands-on nursing. And that was basically because I went to a careers fair. I stayed on, so I didn't do very well at school. Tried to stay on to get some more O-levels and a couple of A-levels, went to a careers fair, said I wanted to be a nurse, and the careers officer says, well, you can go and do that now. You can be an enrolled nurse, the requirements are less, it's more practical, it's more patient focused. So I said, right, that's it, waved goodbye, and off I went to London. And during that, once I'd qualified, I got a range of experience working on a range of wards, which was really interesting. But I think my interest in research was really started in 1988 when I worked on the HIV/AIDS ward at St Stephen's Hospital, Thomas Macaulay. And obviously by the date you will recognise that it was very much in the early part of the HIV/AIDS pandemic. With the campaign, most of you on the call will probably be too young to remember the AIDS Don't Die of Ignorance campaign. But hopefully you've all watched It's a Sin, so you may be a little bit more aware of it. And I think what working on the ward there taught me, as well as the importance of giving good nursing care, was the importance of research, because obviously there were no treatments. Everything, we were all really grappling about in the dark for new treatments and how to manage symptoms and also end-of-life issues. So research was seen as something that happened somewhere else. The research nurses would swan onto, I say swan, they'd come onto the ward, they didn't wear a uniform, they were seen as something different. Research was seen as something that other people did somewhere else within the hospital, and communication was quite poor between the teams. So I having worked on the ward, I then decided I wanted to really pursue a nursing career. And so I did a 1-year conversion course to registered general nurse. And that's me looking all proud because I've become a registered nurse. And that really started my research nursing career. After a stint on doing some surgical nursing, I got an opportunity to be a research nurse, still at St Stephen's Hospital. And there I was given the opportunity to work on a number of some of the early HIV drug studies. And so it felt like a really happy balance, because I was able to maintain my HIV clinical skills, but also start to develop an understanding of the importance of research and how research was conducted. This was very much from a commercial drug. You know, we need to get drugs to launch, to license in order to improve care. So I was involved in recruitment, patient follow-up, reporting of safety data, collecting data, entering data onto a database, although most of it was collected by paper back in the day. But that really did spark that's where I'd say my research career started, from a sort of clinical perspective. And then I went to Australia, got an opportunity to go and work in Australia. And again, that was again working for commercial sponsored studies, but working with a network of GPs who they were involved in the care and management of people with HIV. So again, I got sort of primary care perspective as well. believe it or not, didn't gel with Australia despite the weather. I wanted to come home, got very homesick, so I came back, but decided I quite liked I enjoyed living by the sea, and it coincided with a new consultant had started in Brighton, and he was very research focused and very much wanted to set up a research unit in Brighton at the Royal Sussex County Hospital. So I got the job as research manager. And again, for the first few years, our portfolio was very much focused on commercial clinical trials. But I think that was a really good grounding, a really good foundation, because obviously commercial sponsors run their studies to the highest possible GCP, you know, under the MHRA, UK, it wasn't law at the time, but as it is now for drug studies, but to a very high standard. And so I then thought, actually, research is what I want to do. As I didn't have any ologies, I thought I better do some studying. So I was actually chatting to a colleague who was a cardiology research nurse, and she just finished her MSc. So believe it or not, and it is, I got into what this is one of my proudest moments, is I got into the University of Oxford, and Kellogg College at the time focused very much on postgrad training courses, and they ran an MSc in evidence-based healthcare with some really eminent speakers. So it had different modules: critical appraisal, literature searching, stats, which I just scraped through by the skin of my teeth, but it was modular. So I basically worked full-time and studied for my MSc, but you know, perseverance, resilience, and you get there in the end. So got my MSc, and in a way that gave me the theoretical underpinning that I felt I needed to have some sort of credibility in an academic research setting. So as the HIV unit developed in Brighton, we had more consultants coming on board. We were able to build up our own academic portfolio of studies. So these are investigator-led. We would also collaborate with units in London and Manchester and other parts of the country to really do the research that made an impact on patient care. So we had the commercial drug studies running along, that was our sort of bread and butter, but our academic-led studies, you'll see in a couple of slides, were very much about managing long-term issues with people living with HIV. But as I got more involved in the academic-led studies, I was able to contribute to grant applications. And I think my expertise, I developed expertise in research management, governance, all the regulatory issues, patient and public involvement, getting a team of patients and people with HIV to contribute to our research, costings, budgets, probably all the bits that the clinicians didn't want to do, I got to do, but actually making sure that research is conducted to a high standard with patients at the centre of that has always been something I was very passionate about. So I think the shift then came that I was listed as COAP and named on publications as well, and that might be something we come up that's good for discussion. How do we make sure that the right people are listed as authors on publications? I also then got an opportunity to do some teaching, and I then also got a grant to do my own nurse-led research project. I'm not going to go into this in detail, but I think it just shows again how quickly research moved forward in the field of HIV, and with all the new treatments, and that obviously still continues even though I'm not there. All the drug development carries on, but I think the reason I put this up there is with all these treatments, actually, if I go to my next slide, where our interest was actually putting in grants that were developing services to meet an aging population, looking at how we can support our patients to take the treatment, so around adherence, you know, how can we support those, and then my own piece of research was, you know, how involved are patients, how involved do they want to be in their own care? So our, if you like, research themes were very much about patients and service delivery. So then, so I did that for a number of years, and was able to build up a bit of an understanding of what it was like to run studies from an academic perspective. And then I was given the opportunity, I was seconded part-time to look at whether or not a clinical trials unit was actually needed, and what would we need to have one within Brighton. And I'm not going to repeat what Simon has said about CTUs, but just to emphasize, it's very multidisciplinary with, as Simon said, trial managers, data managers, statistician, administrators, other methodologists. So yeah, very multidisciplinary, all with different experiences. So it makes it really interesting. I then just happened to stay. Thought, well, you know, I've helped set the thing up, I might as well continue. And I was operational manager for a while. And then in October, I was given the opportunity to become the director. It seems like a natural progression, as I'd been there from the start. And perhaps slightly different from Simon's role, but there is obviously quite a bit of overlap around what we get involved in. And I think one thing I'm very clear about is I get involved from grant development right from the very, very early stages. And I always make sure that someone from the CTU, if possible over and above the statistician, is also named as a co-app on the grants. And at the moment, that's me. And what I like to think I bring to the grants is that experience of running, managing, knowing how tricky it can be to manage, you know, randomized controlled trials and other well-designed services. So it's a sort of supportive, collaborative role. That's if the budget allows. I also get to do all the costings and manage the CTU budgets and costings for each grant application, which vary. And I was really interested and pleased actually that Simon said they also support a number of RFPBs, because that, I'd say a lot of that is our bread and butter. But it's more bread than butter really, because they're not huge financially. So we have to be creative in how we support those. But we have also had RFPB that has now just been awarded an HTA for the definitive study. So by being involved at the beginning, especially from the data management side, and learning from the feasibility study, our CTU were able to advise and support the lead applicant on that. So I get to manage the team with trial, quality assurance and data managers, administrator. We're a very small team, but hopefully with a few more larger grants coming in, we will expand. And Simon alluded to the fact that CTUs need to be registered. That's like a seal of approval, if you like, in order to be in the inner sanctum of the UK CRC network. And there's certain competencies and standards that you have to have. So it's making sure that we're able to meet all of that, so that we can reassure funders that if you fund our research, the study will be managed to a high standard. That's really why CTUs were set up. They wanted that specialist core of expertise to support researchers, to make sure studies were conducted to a high standard, on time, on budget, etc., etc. I get to represent CTU and Brighton at national level within the network. And again, the publications, obviously publication policies, I think, are getting talked about more and more upfront, but I also make sure that I make it very clear to the CI that those that have been heavily involved in the study, so it could be data managers, trial managers, are named on any future publications. And so far we've been very lucky. All our CIs have been very supportive of that. So I think it's important that we try and get these posts to be seen as academics, not just a service. I also manage a module leader for a clinical trial management course, which is run at MRes level. But just a quick plug, if I'm allowed, Anna Marie, it is free to researchers working within Kent, Surrey and Sussex, as it's supported by the CRN. So you will get a copy of these slides, but I can also put the link in the chat as well. And I get involved in a strategic role within the medical school as well. So I've also put a few top tips, which I'll just cover really, really quickly. I think if you're a clinical academic and within your clinical role, if you can get involved, I know the Clinical Research Network are very keen to encourage clinicians to take on the role of principal investigators, to get some exposure to research and trials within your clinical setting. And it's good to see now that most therapy areas do have a research team, and that there are studies, clinical trials going on, in every trust in our region. We've had quite a few trial managers come to us with a variety of backgrounds. So some have been research nurses, some have been postdoc students who have got experience of doing research. It's very much a job that you can be trained into. The same with data management, although they tend to come from a more sort of information systems background. Can you work with a senior researcher? Could you be named as a co-op on some grants? And again, making sure any work you do gets acknowledged. So my summary would be, there are many roles within clinical research management that can utilise your clinical academic expertise. So I was hoping that my journey might just open up some opportunities that you think, I want a career in research, but I'm not sure I want to be the one that's forever having to get the pressure of getting grants and having success rates. Actually, there's other ways you can get involved in that maintains your academic credibility, your knowledge and skills, but it's working in a more collaborative way with clinical academics. And at the end of the day, I started as a nurse. I gave up my registration last year because I felt as though I was becoming more and more removed from patient care. But I think in any research, we'll all agree that patient participant safety and wellbeing is at the centre of good research. And without our participants, we wouldn't have that research. So I hang on to that role by my fingernails to make sure I don't lose that, that sense of purpose. And that's it.
Thank you very much. That was totally fascinating to see you're starting as a nurse. My parents were both nurses as well. And now you're the director of the clinical trials unit. And just to compare the two of you, just to compare the two of you and the journeys that you've taken, they're just so different.